Imagine this: 6 people, a living room, a Tuesday night, a candle on the center of a coffee table, and a smooth river stone sitting next to it. No phones. That's the only rule you announced beforehand. Just no phones for 90 minutes. The discomfort would probably be immediate. You could probably feel it even before it happened. 6 adults who spend an average of 7 hours a day interacting through screens, suddenly sitting in a circle with nothing between them but air and eye contact. Somebody might laugh nervously. Somebody else might cross and uncross their arms 3 times in 30 seconds. You pick up the stone. You explain. Whoever holds the stone speaks. Everyone else listens. Not listens while formulating a response, listens, witnesses. When the speaker is done, they place the stone back in the center. The next person picks it up when they're ready. No one is required to speak. Silence is welcome. Then you ask one question. What are you carrying right now that you haven't said out loud? What would happen over the next 70 minutes could be the most human thing you've experienced in years. Someone might talk about their mother's diagnosis. Another person might talk about feeling invisible at work. Someone else might talk about the quiet terror of watching their child struggle and not knowing how to help. Another person might talk about loneliness, the kind that doesn't make sense on paper because your calendar is full and your group chats are active, and yet you feel somehow like no one actually knows you. Nobody fixes anything. Nobody gives advice. Nobody interrupts. Nobody performs empathy. People just speak and are heard in the same room, breathing the same air. Somebody might cry. People may even hug on the way out. This is a hypothetical, but it's not a fantasy. This kind of gathering has a structure. It isn't spontaneous. It isn't therapy. It isn't a dinner party that happens to get deep. It's a ritual, a fire circle. And today, I'm going to teach you how to hold one. I'm Sarah, and this is Ritual Friday on The Wired Ape. Every Friday, we deliver one practice, complete with cultural origins, scientific evidence, step-by-step instructions, common mistakes, and realistic expectations. Today's practice is different from our previous breathwork and writing episodes. Those were individual practices. This is communal. This is about what happens when human beings sit together in physical space with structure and intention, and speak honestly without the mediation of screens. This episode pairs with Wednesday's Scholar Fire on AI societies and conformity, the way algorithmic curation homogenizes thought, suppresses dissent, and creates the illusion of connection while eroding its substance. Wednesday explored the problem. Today delivers the antidote. Here's the Wired Ape frame. For 300,000 years, human beings processed emotional experience, maintained social bonds, resolved conflict, and made collective decisions through face-to-face conversation in small groups, not through text, not through feeds, through breath, eye contact, vocal prosody, facial microexpressions, and the biochemical cascade that happens when mammalian nervous systems co-regulate in shared physical space. The fire circle is a modern adaptation of ancient format, drawing from multiple cultural. The fire circle is a modern adaptation of this ancient format, drawing from multiple cultural traditions while providing a structure that anyone can facilitate in their living room, with no special training, no certification, and no equipment beyond a talking object and a timer. The fire circle draws from 3 primary cultural lineages. Each must be named, credited, and understood on its own terms before we synthesize them into modern practice. Lineage 1, Native American talking circles. The talking circle is a practice documented across numerous indigenous North American nations, including Lakota, Ojibwe, Cherokee, and many others, though its forms, protocols, and spiritual significance vary widely between nations and communities. The common structural elements across many documented forms include principles seated in a circle, representing equality, interconnection, and the cyclical nature of life, a talking piece, feather, stone, staff, or other object, passed from speaker to speaker. Only the person holding the talking piece speaks. All others listen without interruption, and the circle continues until everyone who wishes to speak has done so. The talking circle is not merely a communication technique. In many indigenous traditions, it is a sacred practice embedded in spiritual cosmology, community governance, and healing ceremonies. The circle represents wholeness. The talking piece carries the authority and the responsibility of honest speech. The act of listening without response is understood not as passive reception, but as active witnessing, a form of honor extended to the speaker. The talking circle belongs to the indigenous nations that developed and maintain it. It is not available for wholesale extraction or rebranding. The Wired Ape Fire Circle draws inspiration from the structural principle of the talking piece and the ethic of witnessing, while explicitly acknowledging that we are referencing, not replicating, a sacred tradition. We encourage listeners who feel drawn to the talking circle specifically to seek out Indigenous teachers, communities, and resources to learn about it within its proper cultural context. The practice we teach today is a modern adaptation, not a reproduction. Lineage 2. Quaker Meetings for Worship. The Religious Society of Friends, commonly known as Quakers, developed a radically egalitarian meeting format beginning in the 17th century in England. In the unprogrammed meeting tradition, still practiced by many Quaker communities, there is no minister, no liturgy, no prepared sermon. Participants gather in silence. When someone feels genuinely moved to speak, not out of social obligation, but from deep inner prompting, they stand and share. Others may speak, or the entire meeting may pass in silence. The Quaker format contributes several principles to the fire circle. Silence as the default state. Speech emerges from silence rather than filling it. No response or debate. What is shared is received, not argued with. Equality of voice. There is no hierarchy of who may speak, and discernment over performance. The purpose is to share truth as experienced, not to impress or persuade. The Quaker concept of holding someone in the light, offering presence and attention without attempting to fix, advise, or interpret, is the spiritual ancestor of what the fire circle calls witnessing. Lineage 3. West African Palaver traditions. The Palaver, from the Portuguese Palaver, meaning word or speech, is a communal dispute resolution and decision-making practice documented across numerous West African societies, including the Mende, Bele, and other groups in what are now Sierra Leone, Liberia, Guinea, and surrounding regions. In Palaver tradition, the entire community gathers under a designated palaver tree, often a large, shade-giving tree that serves as the civic center of the village. Every member of the community has the right to speak. An elder or facilitator moderates but does not control. The goal is not to determine a winner, but to reach consensus, a collective understanding that all participants can live with, even if not all fully agree. The Palaver contributes to the fire circle principle of communal witnessing as governance, the idea that the act of being heard by the group itself is a form of resolution. It also contributes to the understanding that conversation is a civic practice, not private therapy, but public architecture for maintaining social cohesion. A convergence, 3 traditions, 3 continents, 3 very different cultural contexts, and the same structural insight. When human beings sit in a circle, speak honestly, one at a time, and listen without interruption, something happens that casual conversation cannot produce. The nervous systems in the room begin to synchronize. Trust emerges not from persuasion, but from presence. And the experience of being heard, truly heard, without advice, without judgment, without performance, produces a depth of connection that no algorithm can approximate. Why does physical, face-to-face, structured group conversation produce effects that screen-mediated communication cannot? There are 4 mechanisms. Mechanism 1, autonomic co-regulation. When human beings are in physical proximity, their autonomic nervous systems begin to influence each other. Heart rates synchronize, breathing patterns entrain, galvanic skin response, which is a measure of sympathetic arousal, correlates across individuals in the same room. This is co-regulation, the process by which one person's nervous system helps regulate another's. It's the mechanism that allows a calm mother to soothe a distressed infant through physical presence alone before any words are exchanged. The polyvagal theory, developed by Stephen Porges, describes the social engagement system, a neural circuit connecting the vagus nerve, the muscle of the face and middle ear, and the larynx, the voice box, that activates specifically during safe face-to-face interaction. When this system is active, heart rate slows, breathing deepens, facial muscles soften, and vocal prosody becomes warmer and more melodic. Co-regulation requires physical presence. It requires shared space. It requires shared air, It requires shared space and access to the full bandwidth of human sensory input, facial microexpressions, body posture, vocal term, breath rhythm, and proximity. Video calls transmit a fraction of this bandwidth. Text transmits almost none. The fire circle, by placing people in a room together with no screens, activates the co-regulation circuit at full capacity. Mechanism 2, the mirror neuron system, and embodied empathy. Mirror neurons, first discovered in the 90s by Giacomo Bizzoletti and colleagues at the University of Parma, are neurons that fire both when an individual performs an action and when they observe someone else performing that same action. While the exact scope and function of human mirror neurons remains debated in the literature, the broader action observation network is well established. Watching another person's facial expressions, gestures, and emotional responses activates the overlapping neural circuits in the observer's brain. This system is thought to contribute to empathy, the ability to share and understand another's emotional state. When you sit across someone who is speaking about grief, and you see their eyes fill and their voice break, your own emotional processing circuits activate in parallel. You don't just understand their pain intellectually, you feel a version of it in your own body. This embodied resonance is dramatically stronger in person than through screens because it depends on high-fidelity sensory input, the subtle tremor of a hand, the catch in the breath, the shift in posture that a webcam doesn't capture. Mechanism 3. Oxytocin and social bonding circuits. Oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, though more accurately described as a modulator of social salience, is released during positive social interactions, including eye contact, physical proximity, deep conversation, and shared emotional experiences. Research confirms that oxytocin modulates brain networks involved in social cognition, trust, and emotional processing, including the prefrontal cortex, amygdala, and ventral tegmental area, VTA. The fire circle creates conditions that optimize oxytocin release, sustained eye contact during listening, emotional vulnerability during speaking, physical proximity within a small group, and the absence of threat, no debate, no judgment, no performance pressure. The resulting neurochemical environment promotes trust, reduces defensiveness, and allows the kind of deep disclosure that casual social interaction rarely reaches. Importantly, recent research has nuanced the love hormone narrative. Oxytocin doesn't uniformly produce bonding. It amplifies social salience. In safe environments, it promotes trust and affiliation. In threatening environments, it can enhance defensive behavior. The fire circle structure, with its explicit norms of non-judgment and witnessing, creates the safe context in which oxytocin can do its pro-social work. Mechanism 4. Narrative witnessing and the social brain. The human brain evolved not as a solitary processor, but as a social one. Robin Dunbar's social brain hypothesis argues that the large human neurocortex, the outer, most recently evolved layer of the brain, evolved primarily to manage the cognitive demand of complex social relationships. We are built to process narrative and community, to tell stories, hear stories, and update our social models based on what we learn about each other. When someone shares a personal narrative in a group setting and is met with silent, attentive witnessing, no advice, no interruption, no one-upping, the speaker's brain registers something profound. I have been received. This experience activates the same reward circuits as other forms of social acceptance and belonging. The absence of response is not coldness, it's spaciousness. It communicates, your experience is enough. It doesn't need to be improved, explained, or compared. For the listener, witnessing without response exercises a neural skill that algorithmic social interaction atrophies, the capacity to hold space for discomfort without acting on it, to sit with someone else's pain without trying to fix it. This is a form of emotional regulation that strengthens prefrontal inhibitory control and reduces the compulsive helpfulness that often serves the helper's anxiety more than the speaker's need. The traditions and the neuroscience describe the same phenomenon. Indigenous talking circles understood that the talking piece creates safety through structure. When only one person can speak at a time, the anxious energy of conversational competition dissolves. There's no need to rehearse your response while someone else is talking because you're not expected to respond. The structure frees attention for genuine listening. Quaker meetings understood that silence is not absence. Silence is the medium from which honest speech emerges. When the default is silence, the words that break it carry weight. They are offered rather than performed. West African Palaver traditions understood that being heard by the community is itself a form of healing. Resolution doesn't require agreement, it requires witnessing. Neuroscience confirms co-regulation, nervous system activation, oxytocin release, and social reward processing All require the conditions that these traditions create: physical presence, emotional safety, structured turn-taking, and the absence of evaluative response. The fire circle synthesizes these principles into a format accessible to anyone, regardless of spiritual tradition or cultural background. It is not indigenous ceremony. It is not Quaker worship. It is not Palaver governance. The fire circle is a modern practice that honors the structural wisdom of all three by applying it to the epidemic of disconnection that Wednesday's episode diagnosed: the slow erosion of genuine human contact in a world mediated by algorithms. Here's your complete fire circle protocol. You can hold one this weekend. What you need: 3 to 8 people. Fewer than 3 lacks the group dynamic, but more than 3 makes rounds too long. A quiet, comfortable space. A living room works perfectly. A talking object: a stone, a piece of wood, a candle, a shell, anything that feels grounded and meaningful. A timer, optional, for keeping the circle to a reasonable length. No phones. This is non-negotiable. Phones go in a basket, a bag, or another room. Total time, 60 to 90 minutes. Phase 1, opening, 5 to 10 minutes. The facilitator, that's you. No special training required. Welcomes everyone and sets the container. Here's a suggested script. Thank you for being here. What we're going to do tonight is simple but unusual. We're going to sit in a circle and take turns speaking honestly about what's alive in us, without interruption, without advice, and without anyone needing to respond. This is a space for honest expression and deep listening. There are 4 ground rules. 1. Only the person holding the talking object speaks. Everyone else listens. 2. When you're listening, you are witnessing, not formulating a response. There will be no feedback, advice, or commentary on what anyone shares. 3. What is shared in the circle stays in the circle. Confidentiality is sacred. 4. Silence is welcome. If the talking object comes to you and you don't wish to speak, simply hold it for a moment, then place it back in the center or pass it on. No one is required to share. Light the candle if you're using one, and take a collective breath. A slow inhale together, a slow exhale together. The single shared breath activates the co-regulation circuit immediately. Phase 2, the opening round, of 15 to 20 minutes. Place the talking object in the center of the circle. Offer a single prompt. Here are a few. You can choose one. What are you carrying right now that you haven't said out loud? What is the truest thing about your life right now? What do you need the people in this room to know about how you're really doing? The facilitator picks up the talking object first and models vulnerability by sharing briefly and honestly, 2 to 3 minutes. This sets the depth. The facilitator goes surface level, the circle will stay surface level. If the facilitator models genuine emotional honesty, the group will follow. After speaking, the facilitator places the talking object back in the center. The next person picks it up when they're ready. There is no fixed order. Whoever feels moved to speak reaches for the object. Each person speaks for as long as they need, though a gentle guideline of 3 to 5 minutes per person keeps the circle moving. When everyone who wishes to speak has spoken, a moment of silence. Let the circle breathe. Phase 3, the deep round, 20 to 30 minutes, optional for groups that are comfortable. Offer a second prompt that goes deeper. What are you afraid of that you haven't admitted to anyone? What do you wish someone would ask you about? What grief are you carrying that you haven't fully honored? Same protocol, talking object, no response, witnessing only. This round is optional. For a first-time fire circle, the opening round alone is often sufficient and powerful. Trust the group to find its depth. Forcing depth produces performance, not authenticity. In Phase 4, closing, about 5 to 10 minutes. The facilitator offers a brief. Thank you for what you brought here tonight. Every person in this circle showed courage by showing up, whether you spoke or sat in silence. What was shared here stays here. What you carry out is the experience of having been heard and having heard others. Let's close the way we opened, with one shared breath, one collective slow inhale, one collective slow exhale. And you can blow out the candle if you're using one. The circle is complete. What follows, conversation, hugs, tea, snacks, is unstructured and organic. Let it happen naturally. Some facilitation notes. You do not need to be a therapist to hold a fire circle. You need to be present, honest, and committed to the structure. The structure does the work. Your job is to maintain the container, gently redirecting if someone tries to give advice. Remember, in this space, we witness rather than respond, and ensuring the talking object protocol is reciprocal. What if someone shares something deeply distressing? The fire circle is not therapy. If someone discloses something that requires professional support, suicidal ideation, active abuse, imminent danger, acknowledge what they've shared after the circle closes and privately offer to help them find appropriate resources. During the circle itself, witness. The structure holds. What if no one wants to go first? Sit in the silence. Let it become uncomfortable. The discomfort is productive. It's the nervous system adjusting to a format that doesn't demand constant speech. Someone will eventually reach for the talking object. It might take 60 seconds. That's okay. 90 seconds of silence in a room full of adults is powerful. How often should you hold a fire circle? Monthly is ideal for maintaining depth without it becoming routine. Quarterly works for broader groups. Weekly is too frequent for most people. The material needs time to accumulate between circles. Here are some common mistakes in troubleshooting. Mistake 1. Allowing crosstalk or advice giving. This is the single most common failure point. The moment someone responds to an exchange with, I had a similar experience, or have you tried, the fire circle becomes a regular conversation, and the magic of witnessing evaporates. The facilitator must hold this boundary kindly but firmly. Practice saying, in this space, we receive without responding. Thank you. Mistake 2. Using phones just for the timer. No. Buy a kitchen timer. Use a watch. The presence of phones, even face down, even on silent, changes the nervous system's orientation. The brain knows the phone is there and allocates attention accordingly. Removing phones entirely is what creates the social engagement system activation that make the fire system work. Mistake 3 is inviting too many people. More than 8 people makes rounds exhaustingly long and reduces the intimacy that drives depth. 3 to 6 is the sweet spot. Think of it as the size of a campfire circle, not an auditorium. Mistake 4. Skipping the facilitator's open share. If the facilitator asks a deep question and then passes the talking object without modeling vulnerability, the group will stay safe and shallow. The facilitator goes first specifically to demonstrate the depth that's being invited. This requires real courage. You are not above the circle. You are in it. Mistake 5. Filling silence with prompts. If the silence stretches after a share, resist the impulse to offer a new question or commentary. The silence is processing time. It's where integration happens. Let it breathe. A 60-second silence after someone shares something vulnerable is not awkward, it's respectful. Mistake 6. Making it a recurring obligation rather than an invitation. The moment a fire circle becomes a mandatory calendar event, it becomes a chore and the authenticity drains. Issue invitations. Let attendance be voluntary. The people who come are the people who need to be there. Here's your challenge. Hold a fire circle this weekend, 3 to 6 people, your living room, 60 to 90 minutes, 1 candle, 1 talking object, no phones. You don't need to call it a fire circle. That might feel strange for some groups. Call it an experiment in honest conversation. Call it unplugged tonight. Call it whatever gets your people in the room. Use the opening prompt. What are you carrying right now that you haven't said out loud? Track this. After the circle closes, notice how your body feels. Notice how your sleep is that night. Notice whether the people who attended referenced the experience in the following days. Share your observations without breaking confidentiality about what was shared on our social media. How many people came? How long did the silence last before someone picked up the talking object? What shifted? The fire circle occupies a unique place in the Wired Ape toolkit because it's the only practice that is inherently communal. Breathwork, cyclical sighing, box breathing. Breathing regulates the individual nervous system. Expressive writing processes individual emotional memory. The fire circle does something neither can do alone. It activates the social engagement system, the neural circuitry that evolved specifically for face-to-face human connection and that modern screen-mediated life is systematically deactivating. Wednesday's Scholar Fire diagnosed the problem. Algorithmic social interaction creates echo chambers, suppresses authentic expression, and replaces genuine connection with its simulacrum. The fire circle is the direct corrective. It cannot be algorithmed. It cannot be optimized. It cannot be scaled. It works precisely because it's small, embodied, unmediated, irreducibly human. For Cyvester listeners, the group decision-making implications are significant. Research consistently shows that diverse small groups making decisions through structured dialogue produce better outcomes than individuals or unstructured groups. The fire circle format, with its prohibition on crosstalk and its emphasis on hearing every voice, is a template for the kind of deliberative process that reduces groupthink and herd behavior in investment committees and strategy sessions. When Virtual OS launches in August 2026, the Fire Circle will be featured as a monthly communal practice recommendation, with facilitation guides, pumped libraries, and optional integrations with practitioner-led circles through the Virtual OS directory. 3 points. 1. The Fire Circle activates co-regulation, mirror system resonance, oxytocin release, and social reward processing, neurobiological mechanisms that require physical presence and cannot be replicated through screens. 2. The structure is simple: a circle, a talking object, one speaker at a time, no response, witnessing only. The structure does the heavy lifting. You don't need to be a therapist. You need to be honest. 3rd, the most radical act available to a wired ape in a digital jungle is to sit in a room with other human beings, put away every screen, and say what's true. Hold your fire circle this weekend. 3 people, 1 candle, 1 question, 1 hour. See what happens when the algorithm disappears and the human appears. Follow the Wired Ape on Instagram and X. Visit thewiredape.com for the full virtual library entry and the downloadable facilitation guide. Head to Sylvester.com. Join the watering hole on Telegram. Come back Monday for the next Mismatch Monday. Be kind to your Wired Ape brain.